Hi guys, today I'm going to talk to you about making this environment in Blender. We made in the last videos the skin shaders, the hair, we set all this up from Dev Studio, and then the garments we've set up from Clo3d, we've imported everything from Clo. I'll link those videos in the bottom if you haven't already seen those, and today we're going to create this environment. We're going to create this ground plane, this puddle, the rocks, the skylight, and the walls and everything. If I show you guys the original scene that I worked with, you can see the setup here. So I've got a couple of lights in the scene as well as the skylight or the world light. I've got two walls in the background just positioned behind the character to kind of catch a bit of light in the corner of this space. There's some rocks on the ground. I have this ground plane with a ground texture applied to it here, and a puddle kind of underneath the character just to add something into the scene. Now I'll show you guys how to set this all up. In the last video, we were kind of at this point, we've got the clothing, we've got the character set up, all the hair and skin is good to go now. The materials in the garment are all done, and we can start to build this, build up this environment. The first thing I'm going to do is I'll just keep my split view, but work more on this side. I'm going to turn this bottom timeline space into a shader editor. So just click this, the icon to the far left, and set to shader editor. And now we can just, adjust our shaders in the bottom space workspace here. We can start to add in the walls on the plane first, the ground plane first. So if I press Shift and A and search for mesh and add a plane, I can press S on the keyboard and scale this up a little bit to have a ground plane. And we can do the same for the walls behind the character. So if I press Shift and A and add a plane, I can press R on the keyboard, press X to target the X axis, so the red axis that goes across the screen. And then if I press 90 on my keyboard, type in 90, and then hit enter, I can rotate my plane 90 degrees. If I press G, I can grab this and move it freely. But if I press G and press the Z button for the Z axis for up and down, I can lock this to the Z axis and just move this up and down. So I can bring this in line with the ground. And then if I press G and Y, I can move this backwards behind the character. I'm going to scale this up a little bit and then press R to rotate this again and Z to rotate this on the Z axis, so they up and down, and just rotate this a little to create an angle behind the character. I can look at this like from the top down. So if I click on the Z top axis here, it will snap me into top view. And then if I press Shift and D on the keyboard, I can duplicate this plane. I can drop it down, press R again, and rotate this on the Z axis because we're locked into the Z view. You'll see that these disappear when I'm not selecting them. They're still there, they've not disappeared. They're visible from the front and the back, but from this top view, they're not because they have no thickness on this axis. So to fix that, you can just add a modifier, select the plane you're working with, go to this blue wrench option here, add modifier, solidify, and then this is adding some thickness. So this is adding 0.01 meters or 1 centimeter of thickness. And we can do the same on the other. So add modifier, solidify, and now we can see these walls from the top. I'm going to grab this one just with the G key and just kind of make it a little bit more. And then just kind of position this not too close, but not too far from the character. I can press S with both of these selected and scale them together. I can press G and the Z key again and move them together, if I get a nice angle, I can move them at the same time. This is just to catch some shadows and catch some light in the corner to kind of give us that photo studio feeling, but we want to add some textures into the ground. The first thing I've done is actually add a world light into the scene. So in my shader editor in the bottom, I can change from object view to world view. And you will see here I have an HDRI light set in my scene. If you've not done this before, You'll probably see this by default. If you can't see anything, you might have use nodes turned off. So turn on use nodes. And you'll have a background and out. This is the background color. So right now, if you look at this in render view, our background color is going to be gray. If I change this to red, it'll become red. Whatever. If I select this and I have Node Wrangler activated, so just check your add-ons, edit, preferences, go to add-ons, search Node Wrangler is activated, make sure you've got this turned on. Select this background output, press Ctrl and T, and then click open. And I'm just going to navigate to my HDRI folder and choose this one called Lakes. And this is now my lake light shining into my scene. So I've got now a shadow behind my character. This is, the light's feeling natural. For the resources that I'm going to work with for this project, so the ground texture, the rocks, and this light, everything is coming from Polyhaven. So if we quickly take a look there, this is the ground texture I'm working with. It's called Rocks Ground 8, and I can download the Blender file directly here if I click the Blender icon. For the HDRI, choose what you want, choose the sky or the type of environment that you want, experiment with this. There's a lot to choose from. And then in the 3D assets section, there's these rocks. And again, I can download these as a Blender file and work with them directly in my scene. So I've downloaded these rocks as well. So first things first, let's select the plane. In this, we want to go back into object view for the shader. So click here where it says world and just choose object. And now we can see the material for this ground. And right now there's no material applied. If you want to import the material that we made, that we've just downloaded, we can go to File, Append, and then go to your download. So for me, it's Rocks Ground 8 here. Open that folder and you'll have a Blender file in that folder. Click this Blender file and then choose Material. And in that Materials folder, you'll have this Rocks Ground 8 material already set up. So click Append and that will come into our scene. If you drop this menu down here, this circle next to the new button, and we look down here for Rocks Ground 8, or well, this is in the scene twice, but now we've, choose the one that you need. This material is already set up. It's already pre-built for us in Blender, and the thing we want to look at over here is the scaling factor. So if I put this into render view now, we have some scaling applied to this texture. It's 3x by 3y, so it's 3 tiles across by 3 tiles wide. If I set this to 1 by 1, it's going to be a bigger scale to look at, and if I set this to 4 by 4, it's going to be a smaller scale to look at. This has displacement activated, but right now we're not seeing the effect of this displacement. It's still very flat, and that's because we don't have enough subdivision on this mesh. So I'm just going to join these views. So if you've got a split view and you want to join them, right click in the area, this edge between, and click join areas and just click this over. We need to subdivide this plane. Right now, if I look at this in wireframe view up here, in the top right side, I've got 4 edges. I need a lot more edges to displace this texture. So in order to do that, we're going to select this modifier options, add a modifier, and add subdivision. And subdivision is going to start to make this go round. We want to keep this square, so set this to simple. And turn off optimal display to see how this is affecting your mesh. So now I have 4 squares with edges in between. I want this to be quite a lot of tessellation on this mesh, so I'm just going to increase this to 5. And then just apply this modifier. I'm going to add another one back on top of this so that I can, increase this even more. So I'll turn off the optimal display and just add some more subdivision into this, maybe 3 counts. 3 counts for viewport and 3 counts for render, so that they're the same in the viewport and the render that we make in the end. I'm keeping this on the Catmull Clark in the beginning because it's going to give us a nicer, we will have less sharp edges, and you'll see it's started to kind of round off the corners of our square. If we set this to simple, we get square points in this again, but we can use this Catmull algorithm to smooth some of the edges when this is displaced. Okay, so I'm going to go back into solid view, and then if we take a look now in render view, we should see some displacement on the ground. Yeah. So now we have some bumps, some rocks, some ups and downs. I've set the displacement factor, the scale value here to 0.025. So if I set this to 0.1, we're going to have a lot more displacement in this. And if I set this to 0.05, we're going to have less. You can change the mid value as well if you want to change where this is starting from. I'm just going to leave this where it is. And maybe set this to 0.03. Okay. If I look closely at this still now, you will see, we can see the mesh. We can see square faces in this still from the subdivision that we've applied to this with this modifier. If I right click this mesh and click shade smooth, those faces have disappeared. So just a note on shading, if I set this to shade flat again, you will see those faces, and if I set this to shade smooth, they should be less visible. So ensure your ground plane set to shade smooth, and then we can start to look at creating this puddle in the floor and then adding the rocks. So I'm just going to scale this ground up a little bit and look at the scaling here. This is set to 4, so that's fine. Okay, so the puddle. We're going to need to sculpt a little bit for this. So I'm going to go back into solid view. On the top left side, I'm going to go from object view to sculpt mode. And I'm going to just go down to the right side here and click add under shape keys. So under the object data properties, this green triangle, click add under shape key to create a basis, and then click add again to create a shape key. Set this key to 1. And this key is going to just what we're going to sculpt in, so we can add and remove this sculpt if we need to. I'm going to go to grab, so go down on the left side to these yellow options, and there's one called grab. I'm going to set my radius quite big, not too big. I might set my strength a bit higher, okay? And what I can do now is click on points in the ground and just lift them up and push them down to make this like a little bit more irregular. So say around the bottom edge of the wall, I want this to be a bit irregular, or like right underneath my character, I want to start to create a dip where we can push like a puddle into this as well, okay? So let's create this dip, and then we can just sculpt around in some areas and lift this up and, you know, push it down a bit. It's just going to make it a little bit more irregular and feel a little bit more realistic. If I want to then turn off this sculpt that I've just done, I want to go backwards, I can just turn off this shape key, so uncheck this box, and that sculpt will disappear, and it will come back if this box is activated. If I just want this but less intensely, I can just drag this slider down, and you'll see my puddle depth is going up and down, and this sculpt is, you know, being increased and reduced. So using shape keys is a nice way to work with the sculpting tool, so I'd advise to do that. It gives you some control. What we're going to do next is go back into object mode and just press Shift and A to add another mesh and add a plane. So this plane is going to become the puddle itself, and I'm just going to press G and the Z key to just drop this down on the Z axis a bit. And you'll see now we can slowly start to just push this into like a puddle around our character. And if we look at this in render view, we can see how the displacement's affecting this as well. So yeah, not bad. There's a little bit of extra puddle, like water puddles here where the displacement's going down, but in general, the edge looks kind of rougher than it did before, you know, so this is good. We just now need to apply a material to this plane that looks like glass or looks like water. If I look closely though, my character is actually floating above my ground plane at this point. So I'm just going to select my puddle, select my ground together, press G and press the Z key, and just drag these guys both up just to sit right underneath the feet of the character, okay? With this plane selected, we can create a new material. So I'm just going to, in the shader editor in the bottom, click new to create a new material. I can also see it in the materials option on the side. We can call this water. And the first thing I'm going to do is just turn the roughness right down. Make this really shiny. Okay. We're going to put the transmission up so this starts to respond more like a glass material. But if we're going to do that, we want to add some thickness to this plane as well so that the glass has, or the liquid has two sides to it. Right now we've just got one front, which isn't quite accurate. So if I go here and go to solidify, you see how this looks slightly different now. The other thing we can play with is the IOR. So if you change this number, you can change how this reflection works. I think water is 1.35, but we can just leave it. And then I can zoom out and it looks like a wet surface now. It's reflecting. We want it to be a bit rippled though, and this is very uniform at the moment. So if I look at my shader here, in this workspace, I'm going to press Shift and A and search for a bump node. Drop that here, and then press Shift and A and search for a noise texture. And I'm going to just press Control, Shift, and T. Oh no, I'm going to press Control, Shift, and left click. Yeah. Control, Shift, and left click on my color output. And just see the scale of this noise right here. So if I increase the scale, we will get more of this kind of noise happening. If I increase the distortion, it's going to start to look a little bit more like a liquid. Increase the detail a bit. I'm going to press Shift and A and search for a ramp. And I'm going to drop this color ramp right on this connect here. So just drop it on top and now it will become black and white. And then I can push these sliders up and down to kind of add some more contrast into this black and white. So now I want to Control Shift left click back on my BSDF shader. So Control Shift on the keyboard and then left click. If this isn't working, you need to activate Node Wrangler like I said before, so make sure you've got that done. With the ramp, connect color to height on the bump, and then connect normal to normal on the shader. And now we get some rippling happening on the surface of our water. But this is way too intense. This is really way too strong. So if I go to distance here and I set this to 0.1, this is going to decrease a lot, maybe 0.01. Okay, so now there's some movement happening on the surface of this water. Maybe I decrease the scale a little bit here. Play around with these controls, but basically we've added a bit of rippling onto this water. The one thing we want to do to this now to make it feel a bit more natural, like the edges of this ground would be wet. They would be more reflective than the rest of the ground that's visible in this scene. So we want to now just kind of add a roughness map around here. And to do that, I'm going to go into this view here, material preview mode. So just turn on material preview. Might take a minute to load the shaders. So my shaders are now loaded and I want to work with this ground plane here. So we're going to add a little texture paint around this puddle to make it look wet. So to do that, I'm just going to come into my shader editing space in the bottom for this plane. I'm going to press Shift and A and search for an image texture. I'm going to drop an image texture node here and I'm going to click New. I'm going to set this to 2048 on both axes, so it's a 4K texture. A 2K texture, sorry, and I'm going to set this to white, a white background texture and click OK. If I go, I'm just going to split my view again, I think. So I'm going to do a vertical split, right click here, vertical split. Look at the puddle on this side, and here we're going to go to, drop this menu down on the top left and go to Image Editor. Here I'm going to look at this material I've made, which is actually called Untitled. Could have given it a nice name. Let's zoom out a bit. Okay. We can call this puddle, actually, if I rename this here. I'm going to go to Image, Save As, and then in my project folder, I'm just going to save this puddle image, and that we are now saved. So to view what I'm going to do, I'm just going to connect this puddle texture to my base color input. And now my base color is going to go white, which is fine. Instead of being in object mode, we're going to go to texture paint mode. And I'm going to set my brush to black and just have a really simple brush applied here. And just paint underneath this puddle. If you need to turn the puddle off to kind of see where you're painting, that's fine. But I'm just going to drop some black all under this puddle. Okay. So now where this is painted black, this is going to be rough, and where it's not, it's going to be reflective, and where it's not, it's going to be rough. So this should now make this feel more like the ground around the puddle is wet. And I'll show you how we can connect all this back together. So let's go back to object mode. This is the texture map that we've kind of just created. I'm going to go to image and click save. So this is now saved, this painting that we've done. And we're just going to need to work a little bit in the node editing space to finish this off. So I'm going to press Shift and A and search for mix. I'm going to set this mix to color. And I'm going to drop this mix with my puddle and my ground. Okay. So this is my ground texture. And I want to blend these guys together so the area around the puddle looks darker. So I'm going to take my ground and stick it in the bottom input and put my puddle in the top. Instead of having mix, I'm going to go to, I think, multiply. And then I'm just going to switch the input of these, I think. Let's see if that works. Right. So now I've got the ground texture going into slot A of this mix, and I've got the puddle texture going into slot B. And if I use this factor with it set to multiply, I can kind of increase and decrease the darkness of this color. So I'm going to set this quite high so this is starting to look darker all around these edges. And we're going to do the same mix for our roughness underneath. So I'm just going to press Shift and D to duplicate this mix node. Drop this on our connect from our roughness material here. Drop that there. So the roughness is going into the top, and then in the bottom we're going to put the same puddle texture right into the B slot. And then again, I can increase and decrease the roughness. So if I look closer now to the edges of this puddle and I turn this down, it's not wet. And if I push this up, it becomes wet. So if I then look at this again in render view, the edges of my puddle are a lot more graduated into this ground plane, and it looks a lot more natural how this water is kind of soaking into the ground around it. It's not a harsh edge. Okay, so this is looking a lot more real. We can do the same thing as we did before, so I'm just going to join these areas again. Go back into solid view, file, append, look for my rocks moss ground set that I downloaded. Open this up. When I click append, choose the Blender file I want to append from, and then go to object, and then I'm just going to select all these objects, all these rocks moss, select everything and click append, and they're just going to pop into our scene, and here they are. So if I look at this from the top down again, I can just move these to the side. I'm going to grab all of them in the outliner, highlight everyone, press M on the keyboard to move, create a new collection and call it rocks, to just keep all my rocks in one place. And then these guys I'm going to call new collection with M, wall and ground, just to keep the space a bit tidied up. And then with the rocks, I think just choose the ones you want, drag them, scale them, rotate them around. It's a bit easier to work top down sometimes with this type of thing. Maybe put one over here. And then just take a look at this in render view. You kind of want to move these down so that they look like they're poking out of the ground a bit. So again, for the rocks, just arrange them kind of what you want them. Spend a little minute doing this. The last thing we can look at is the wall textures. Right now they have no material on. If we click new, we can add a material. So this is called material 1. I'll call this wall. W-A-L-L. And then this other guy, I'm just going to add, drop this down, search for wall. So these guys are working with the same texture now. A nice thing to do, you could make a little mirror. So if you push metallic all the way up and roughness all the way down, you could set some mirrors behind your character, for example, and you with something like this. Push the roughness up to get a bit of reflection, make them look metallic. You know, I can change the color of them. Just, you know, as you want to kind of design your scene, it's up to you. But this is where I really built the environment. In the next video, I'm going to look at the render settings, the camera settings, and everything to really finalize the look of this in camera and do the final renders and color correction. So I hope you guys learned, you know, how to set stuff up, work with different assets that you've downloaded, work with different Blender files, bring things together, set some textures up, and then set some objects in a scene to really bring this together. And like I said, next time we're going to look at some cameras. So if I look here in my camera view, we can set up some nice cameras to work with. Okay. Good luck, and I'll see you guys in the next video.